Well, hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm Kira Sorrells. I'm the Executive Director of NICU Parent Network. And one of the things that we wanted to do during this month, which is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness, is to bring some hope and some awareness to others about infant loss and all the different types of loss that might be experienced during the perinatal period or during the NICU or post NICU. My hope is that we not just talk about our stories, but that we also um, help you find ways to feel hopeful about the future without your children. And we also, of course, want to be able to provide some tangible resources and support for grieving families because there is so much out there. And sometimes when you're in the midst of things, it can be hard to find. So we want to be able to point you directly to that. So, this is part two of our conversation series, and I am joined today by Micah's mama, Jennifer Canvasser, who is the founder and director of NEC Society in California. And Jen, thank you so much for joining me for this wonderful conversation today.
Thank you, Kira. I'm happy to be here.
So let's just start right off. And for those who haven't read your story, because you have written about Micah many, many times, but if they haven't had a chance to hear you talk about Micah or read about your experience, would you please share share a little bit about that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my son Micah and his twin brother were born at 27 weeks gestation. And for the first several weeks of their life, they were both doing really well as preemies at that stage could be doing. I figured they'd be coming home together in just a couple weeks, and I was feeling hopeful and excited for the future. Zachary came home, but Micah was diagnosed with necrotizing enterocolitis that came on very suddenly and very severely, progressed very quickly. He had a lot of complications, multiple bowel resections where he lost a lot of his intestines. He went into renal failure as a result of his infection, but nevertheless, he was strong enough and was able to kind of make enough progress to come home. So Micah came home, and we thought that he had overcome his most challenging obstacles, and that the most difficult moments were behind us. And we knew that we were still going to have a number of challenges with Micah because of his experience with NEC, but we were confident that it was nothing that we couldn't overcome. We had excellent access to medical care, and we're very fortunate to have a lot of family engagement and support, and we were really confident in our ability to get Micah what he needed to thrive. But tragically, Micah developed pneumonia and had a lot of complications from NEC, and so he died just before the twins' first birthday. And I kind of spent a year just really intensely just grieving Micah and learning to live without him physically in our home and in our arms. And I'm lucky to have a background in community organizing and social work and just bringing people together. I worked before my twins were born, I worked for an environmental nonprofit. And so after I had kind of gone through a really intense stage of grieving and just figuring out what to do with myself day to day, like how to breathe and eat and sleep, like basic life functions, I founded the NEC Society. And as many of you probably know, the NEC Society is a nonprofit charity organization that's dedicated to building a world without NEC.
Thank you, Jen. And, so this, what I forgot to mention at that when I first started was that what we're really focusing on today is the unique experience of loss in multiples. And then also that loss in infancy after the NICU. And, something that you said just rang so true with me too, that I thought once we got Zoe home, out of the hospital, out of the NICU, that the worst was behind us. And like you said, like it wasn't going to be easy. She, like Micah, probably would have had lifelong issues to deal with. But you felt confident in your ability as parents to be able to get him what he needed. And I mean, that's exactly the way my husband and I felt as well. Now, some people may say, oh, well, you had twins, so at least you have Zachary, and I don't know how many times you've heard that because I've heard something
Too
similar.
many.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that because I think, of course, I think it's one of those well-meaning comments. People don't think it hurts, but it does.
Mhm.
So talk to me a little bit about that,
Right.
about, having, grieving, but still having another baby to actively parent and take care of.
Yeah. So what I, appreciate about these types of conversation is just like right off the bat recognizing that all of the losses that we might be speaking of, they're all unique and different and devastating and tragic in their own way, right?
Right,
And they should never be compared to any other loss. And so what I think people do is they think about, well, how tragic would it be if you didn't have a child at home
right,
to go, to parent? Of course, that is tragic and devastating, and it doesn't take away from the tragic and devastating experience that we had
right.
with having triplets and twins and losing one of our babies. And so but I agree with you, Kira, that people like to say at
Mm,
least this, at least that, in a way to try to make someone who is grieving feel better when that's really not what we need and not what we're looking for. We're looking for validation and for people to just sit with us and join us in remembering our child and grieving our child with us.
yes, absolutely. And and what about, that because I don't know about you, but when I think about that first year after Zoe passed, it is very fuzzy for me. Because I like you, I felt like I'm gonna grieve really hard right now.
Yeah,
Um, and it makes me wonder, what did I miss maybe
yeah.
with Avery and Lily in that first year after Zoe's loss? And I was also fortunate, like you, had strong family support around me. So can you talk to me a little bit about, you and Zachary and just that first year after Micah died?
I mean, it was really just about surviving, honestly. And even now, we're going to be approaching like 10 years of the 10-year anniversary of Micah's passing. And I sometimes think about like, how did I even make it through that time? Like, it was really just so intense and overwhelming. And it continues to be in different ways, even now, 10 years later almost. But, I think one of the things that sticks out the most for me is just how isolating of an experience it is to lose your baby, and you see these other families, and mostly mothers like doing mom meetups with their babies who were born healthy and didn't have any complications or time in the NICU, and certainly not anything as devastating as child loss. And it makes me, I'm sure you probably felt the same way, so different. And really, I had a really difficult time like being able to make those other connections with other new mothers. I was a first time mom, and it was just really isolating experience and feeling like I was alone, and like I didn't really have anyone that I could lean on. I didn't know anyone else at that time. I didn't have the NEC Society, I didn't have the NICU Parent Network, and so I really didn't know anyone else who had lost their child or lost their baby.
Right.
So, yeah, having to navigate that to where we are now, pretty incredible journey.
Yeah. So what about so with the hospital stay? So tell me a little bit more specifically. So
Yeah.
Micah was home and he got sick and died very quickly after he got sick again. Is that right? So were you in did
Yeah,
you
he was actually readmitted. So he developed pneumonia at home. He was readmitted to the PICU. And you know what, Kira, even when he was readmitted to the PICU, and I think that's probably, all of us as parents we're optimistic and hopeful about our children, right? And so even when he was readmitted, I remember like the nurses and other people like bringing me like angel cards, and like they had a sense that Micah was gonna die, and I'm like, I was like, "I don't know why you're doing this, like, he's not dying, he's fine." Like,
right,
Micah is so strong, you have no idea. And you know
right,
what? He did get better, like, initially, he got over, like, kind of that initial infection of pneumonia, but what was really difficult for me and my spouse to recognize was that he had severe enough complications that he wasn't going to be able to kind of make it over the other humps that he needed to in order to survive long term. So
right.
he was hospitalized, once he was readmitted back into the PICU, he was hospitalized for a few weeks. And we're fortunate to have a pediatric palliative care team involved pretty early on, which is kind of a whole another story that we could get into if there's time
Yeah,
for it.
it is.
But when it was time and it became clear to us that there was not going to be a path forward for Micah, it was actually a very intentional decision to let him go. And will always be incredibly heartbreaking. And the what ifs and the regrets and what if we had done this and why didn't anyone tell us this? There's so much, but nevertheless, what it was us with Micah's care team making a very intentional decision that what was best for Micah was allowing him to not have to suffer and struggle and hurt anymore.
Yeah.
And that is forever a devastating experience and a decision that we made. But I also know that that was the best decision for Micah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. There's nothing like that, having to make that decision. And I mean, we were, very similar. Our readmission was very short.
Mhm.
She was readmitted and 24 hours later,
Wow.
she, uh, it was, and it's interesting because, you were talking about the nurses bringing you angel cards, and I
Yeah.
remember too, like, sitting in, like, they kicked us out of the PICU to intubate her and,
Mhm.
brought us back, like, 3 hours later, so it took much longer than, we were expecting
Mm.
to take, but I remember the doctor talking to us about, like, not knowing what, the long-term effects of what she's experienced will be, and it was like he was trying to tell us, I think, that,
Yeah.
she's not gonna make it out of here, but like you, I was just like, "Oh, yeah, we've been here before. We've been in the
Yep.
NICU, so we're
We can
fine.
do this.
Yeah, we can."
Yeah.
Yeah. So now, because you actually were also, talking about the palliative care team, and that was one thing that I wanted to ask was, during this time, aside from the angel cards, did you have, or what was that kind of support, or, you know, from the medical team during this time for you?
Yeah. So,
There.
when Micah was about 6 months old, that's when we were referred to the pediatric palliative care team.
Okay.
And my initial reaction to them was like, "What are you doing here? I don't want you anywhere near our family. Like, go
Right,
away."
right, right.
And so thankfully they didn't go away. Thankfully they stayed and they helped me understand that they could actually help improve Micah's quality of life. And it wasn't about Micah dying, it was about Micah living and really making the best out of his life.
Yeah.
And so I ended up welcoming palliative care, and we had a really beautiful relationship. And that helped because when Micah was readmitted, they were right back with us.
Okay.
And they were able to kind of bring us, I still was not in any place to accept that this was going to be the end for him. I was, until it was happening, I didn't. And even when it was happening, I remember just laying in the bed with Micah on my chest, like, I think we all would, right? Like hoping for a miracle, like hoping that somehow something is gonna just happen and it's all gonna change and I'm gonna just be able to bring him back home because I so desperately wanted this child.
Yes.
But having palliative care there to help guide our decisions, and support us was really helpful. So I would say that they were probably one of the kind of biggest support systems in place. As in addition to having, we had been in the PICU with Micah before, and so
Mhm.
having those relationships and that continuity of care and like with people who knew us and who knew Micah and who those
Right.
relationships and the trust and rapport were crucial during those moments.
Oh, for sure. I'm glad that you had that team that you already knew and that already knew
Yeah.
your family. Um, so what about, like, that day? Is there anything you wish had been done differently, or that you wish you could have done that you didn't have a chance to? Because, there are families who, are again, faced with a decision to make. It's a
Yeah.
very, and it is a very conscious decision, with their care team, but it also can be an opportunity to plan how you want to spend those final
Yep.
moments with your child. So I guess, it's not ever something that you think about when you're having a baby. You don't plan for their
Right.
death, of course. Even,
Right.
if you have a baby in the NICU, I didn't plan for their death.
Right.
Um, so what is something that you wish you had been able to do or wish you had done differently? Do you have
Yeah.
any?
I have a lot. And I think we tried our best to live in the moment, to be present, and to take advantage of those opportunities that we had with Micah in our arms. And we did. We took photos and we read him books and we captured his handprints and footprints. We sang him songs. We did a lot of really beautiful things. But there were certainly a few things that I wish that we had the opportunity to do with Micah, and that I wish all families who are going through such a devastating circumstance have the chance to do. One is, I really desperately wish someone would have taken a photo of Micah with both my spouse and I holding him
Mm,
during our last evening together when he was passing. And like, it was either me taking a photo of Noah with Micah or Noah taking a picture of me and Micah. And I often like just wonder, like, why didn't anyone offer to take a photo of our family together?
right,
And I I just don't get it. I don't understand, like, why didn't that happen? And so that's, one really specific thing that I wish I had is a
mhm,
photo of us both with Micah, and even with his twin Zachary. Why there wasn't more encouragement for us to bring Zachary in and for the brother twins to really have a final moment together.
right,
Even the opportunity to potentially like bring Micah home and to have, this was around
right,
Christmas time. And I think it would have been possible for us to like have Micah, like allow Micah to have a first Christmas with us. And, we didn't. And so there's just, a lot of questions like, why didn't anyone like help us think through those possibilities? Like,
right,
so a
yeah.
lot of what is, and I think ways for care teams to improve the kind of options and care that they provide to families that are going through these circumstances.
Absolutely, because I also think about, the families that do know that it's coming and have some time to plan. We really do lean on the care team that has been through this with families before
Yes.
to tell us what it is that we can do. Like, I didn't know that I could give Zoe a final bath until someone
Yeah,
said, "Oh, do you wanna give her
exactly.
a bath?" And I thought, "Well, of course I wanna give her a bath." But it's not something that I would have thought of to
Right.
ask for. So, yeah,
No.
we really do rely on the care team, or if there is, a bereavement peer support team that's in place or able to help guide. And that actually leads me to my next question. So, you had the palliative care team there with you. What about when you went home after Micah passed? Was there any
Yeah.
sort of follow-up from that care team or anything like that?
Nothing formal. I would receive um, letters and outreach from individual like nurses, like Micah's primary nurses who had been with us for a long time. Like some of them were absolutely incredible. Like they would come and they would visit us, and we had become friends because Micah was in and out of the hospital for almost a year.
Right,
And so they were like family. And so I would say, on an individual level, some of the nurses were really incredible, but like on a hospital kind of institutional level and like more systematic
right.
support,
Mhm.
there was nothing. And I often wonder, like, did the care team just think like we could figure this out on our own because
Right,
we were able to like well positioned to navigate it? Like, I don't know what they
right.
thought. Like,
Yeah,
I honestly remember just like, oh, there's so many crazy things, but I remember just walking out of Micah's room, with a plastic bag of his things and with a booklet, that said like "When your baby dies," like this big, thick
yeah,
booklet,
yeah.
and that was it. Like there were some phone numbers in there that I could call if I wanted to talk to someone, but I never called them. No one ever called me. I was never referred to anywhere, and like thankfully, I somehow like had enough support, I guess, and was
Mm,
able to navigate and be okay. But I think a lot of families probably aren't okay, and it really concerns me for the families who need more support and who don't have the family support that I had. Like,
right,
I just like I wish that there were kind of like a checklist, and maybe there are centers who have this, but like there should be some type of like checklist for every children's hospital of like what to do for a family after they lose their child, and
yes.
make sure that all these things are taking place and that no one falls through the cracks.
Right, absolutely. So, did you find any outside support from, like, any kind of, bereavement support group of, other bereaved families, or was it primarily your immediate family that support?
I honestly, Kira, didn't even know where to look, and I didn't have, like, even the mental capacity to look. Like, I mentioned earlier, like, I was just kind of in surviving mode, like, I was caring for Zachary, I was grieving, and I was just kind of getting by day to day, and it didn't even, like, occur to me that I could look for, like, a bereaved parent support group.
Mm,
It's not something that I had ever even thought about or knew existed, and so I just kind of was getting by on my own with my family support because I didn't know to look anywhere else, and I guess people thought I was doing okay enough that I was not, like, referred to anywhere,
yeah.
but it's just I don't know, it's just really but, like, I think I could have really benefited because I hear what other families have been able to act like the support and being referred to as your child's parent, like this, how I wrote, we both wrote like how we're our child's mother. And it's just, I know like in bereaved support groups is what I've heard. They refer to you as your child's mother as opposed to your first name. And so anyways, my point is that I think I could have gained a lot from those types of support groups, but I didn't know they existed. I didn't know where to look. I had no idea. And no one provided that guidance.
And, it was, and I remember, I think the only reason that I knew about other support groups was specifically because I was in another support group for high order multiples. So the triplets,
Mm,
quadruplets, which is a community very, very unfortunately very knowledgeable of loss. Um, and so I think it was through that other peer network that
mm,
I found um, some support, but I couldn't ever find someone like you that had
mm.
as similar an experience that went through the NICU, came home, and then lost a child and was part of a multiple birth, which is a very unique set of circumstances that's not as
Sure.
common. Um, so let's talk about Jen, the mom, Jen, the
Mhm.
woman, Jen, the spouse, Jen, the advocate. How have you grown or been transformed by being Micah's mom, by his life and by his death? I know that's a huge
It
question.
is in just profound ways, like, I think just being a mother in and of itself changes us, like, on a very human, like, real, like, level, but to be the mother of a child who is no longer physically in our arms, I mean, it has been transformational in some really impactful and powerful ways, and then other just really devastating ways. I think that I've been very fortunate that I've been able to find ways to kind of redirect the energy of the grief into things that are powerful, like into the NEC Society, just like you have with the NICU Parent Network. But I think, like all parents, I would imagine, who lose a child, there's still like kind of the ugly feelings that no one really talks about, that I certainly don't talk about because I know no one really likes to hear them. Just about like the anger and the regret and the shame, and just like the really intense grief and like the sleepless nights and just the wondering and feeling like, am I doing enough for Micah? Am I, and just kind of like the self doubt. So I think that, in some ways it's been really impactful and powerful. And then other ways, it continues to be just really devastating and difficult. And, it's just trying to navigate through those two kind of polarizing emotions.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that's one thing that surprised me the most and was the hardest for me to learn, especially with having surviving children, was
Yeah.
that being happy for them, hitting a
Mhm.
milestone, at the same time being devastated that their sister wasn't there to do it with them. I mean, I'll never forget, putting their
Yeah.
backpacks out for the first time for kindergarten or for preschool and just like, there should be 3.
Yeah.
There shouldn't just be 2, but not letting it take away from the happiness that I feel, and
Yeah.
that's been, I mean, I still struggle with it sometimes, but, we're going on almost 15 years like you, like, it's
Yeah.
been several years at this point, but I think that's
Yeah.
probably the hardest thing that I've had to learn is that, happiness for one doesn't mean I'm neglecting the other.
Right. For sure, and just how they kind of coexist, like the profound grief and devastation coexist with intense joy and being proud of the children that we have physically here.
Right.
The other thing is just like their birthday, right? Like there's part of me that, of course I love my children's birthday. And then there's a part of me that it sounds terrible to say, but I hate my child's birthday because they weren't supposed to be born in January. They were supposed to be born in the spring. And it's really difficult to have those emotions and experiences coexist where you are supposed to be and so happy, and yet we are not. Just it's not just pure happiness. There's a lot of other emotions and feelings and experiences that go into that specific date, or like you said, sending the kids off to school, and the empty chairs and the empty places at the table and so forth where they should be.
So tell me, Jen, what brings you joy?
In addition to my family, I'm very incredible, like so lucky. Micah has two brothers, so Zachary is his twin, and then they have a younger brother, Elijah, and they bring me intense joy. So that they for sure, my family bring me intense joy. But I also feel just so incredibly fortunate to have the NEC Society, because for me that is how I mother Micah, like who is no longer physically here. I can't take care of him in the way that I take care of his brother, but I take care of the NEC Society, and that's to me is how I care for Micah, and how I'm raising Micah's brothers as they grow, and in a way I see the NEC Society in the same way, as like raising this organization from its infancy into this growing, thriving organization to what it's become, and I'm sure to where it will be in the coming years. And so it's I kind of picture the NEC Society as a version of Micah that I give my love to and nurture.
Now tell me the significance of the rainbow.
Yes.
Because everybody follows you, and if you don't follow society, again, you should. You will see
Oh,
rainbows.
thank you. So during when Micah and Zachary were in the NICU and the PICU, I had a lot of baby carriers, as a lot of parents do, but a lot of mine just happened to be really colorful and bright. And so I always wore Micah in these rainbow baby carriers. And when it was the first anniversary of his passing, I was just like totally lost and feeling overwhelmed with just grief and wondering, like, how am I going to celebrate this precious, like, just bundle of joy that was Micah, this smiley, bright, light on the anniversary of his passing, which is just, surrounded by grief. And I wanted it to be uplifting, and I wanted to be surrounded by my family and not just like isolate myself in the bedroom under the covers to cry all day. And so I created what we call Rainbows to Remember Micah. And what started as just, every December 11th, that's the anniversary of his passing, celebrating with Rainbows to Remember Micah, is kind of carried on throughout the year, every year for always. And so we remember Micah with rainbows, because not only because I wrapped him in rainbows when he was a baby, but because we feel like his brightness reminds us of the colorful rainbows, and just brings us, happiness and light when it's otherwise kind of feeling blue and overwhelmed with grief.
So, and I've seen you as well, with your kids, with Zachary and
Yeah.
Elijah, bring Micah
Hmm.
into their lives and even into their school with,
Oh my
art
gosh.
projects. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that can be really hard for
Yeah.
parents of multiples. For, for me, I feel like for the first several years, I was adamant about, because people would see Avery and Lily, they're the same size, they must be twins. And so I always corrected them.
Hmm.
But as they got older, they would hear me say that, so they would correct people. But then they got into, getting close to middle school, and
Yeah.
they would tell me about how, a new friend told them they were lying, or, and so they said, "Mom, can we just be twins?" And,
Mm.
you know, it broke my heart, but at the same time, I said, "Absolutely," because it's your life and your story, and I will tell my story my way.
Yeah.
But you're at that age now where,
Hmm.
you have, authority over your own story. They're sophomores in high school now, and
Hmm.
they're twins until they get to know somebody really well, and
Yeah.
then, at some point, they will talk about Zoe, but,
Yeah.
um, you don't think about your children having to wrestle with those conversations the way we do or we did, when our children were young. So tell me about how you keep
Yeah.
Micah. I mean, he's very present in your life.
Thank you.
It's very evident, and we're not neighbors. We're like
Yeah.
we're virtual
So,
neighbors.
yeah, and it's funny you say this because I relate in so many different ways. So the first thing I'll share was just this morning, their younger brother Elijah was building a fort, and they took a photo of Micah. He put it on top of his fort, and he said, "Mommy, look, I built a fort with Micah." And
Oh,
I took a picture of Elijah in the fort with the photo of his brother right above him, and it's just so sweet. And it's just like an example of how there's photos of Micah around our home. His name is around our home, and he's just present in our lives every day. And
right,
that's what brings us comfort and joy, is keeping him very present in our everyday lives and just constantly. And I wonder sometimes if anyone ever gets sick of me talking about Micah, because sometimes I feel like that's all. I mean, I obviously talk about his brothers a lot too. We
yeah,
all talk about our children a lot, but I talk about Micah a lot.
yeah,
And it brings me intense joy because
right,
he is still my child and I am forever his mother.
right,
But and I celebrate Rainbows to Remember Micah with their classrooms. And so I'm actually planning, because the anniversary is coming up in December. So I'm working with Zachary and Elijah's teachers of like the art activities, and we're planning the day of when we'll come in and do the activities for Rainbows to Remember Micah with their classrooms, which is going to be wonderful. And I was thinking to myself, Zachary has a few more years before he gets to middle school, but as they're switching periods in classrooms, they don't have one central teacher. Like,
right.
will I celebrate Rainbows to Remember Micah with Zachary when they get to middle school? I'm not sure. Like you said, we have to follow our child's lead.
Yeah,
At some point, it transitions from kind of us being the lead of telling the story to our child being
yeah,
able to kind of take that leadership role and telling their version of the story, whatever it might be.
yeah.
And I will accept whatever that will be, just like as you have, Kira. And but it is definitely something that resonates with my family's experience as well.
Yeah. Well, I think it's beautiful. I think that's one of the things that I was very intentional about too after Zoe died, was making sure that no matter what room I walked into my house,
Yeah,
there would be a picture of her.
yeah,
Um, because I just I couldn't imagine it, any other way. And certainly when my children were younger, they would, if they had a tea party, this one's for Zoe. It was more part of their, because of course, just like Zachary, they don't have actual memories of,
exactly.
she was a part of their imaginary play. And then
Yeah,
it's been interesting to see over the years how their understanding of death and grief and, I mean,
yeah,
they've grieved her in different ways too. And it has been interesting. But I think that, like you said, I think one of the most important things we can do for those survivors is to honor and respect when they get to that point.
yeah,
But I think the fact that you've kept Micah so present, and you're always so open, that's going to make those conversations easier. And I'll be excited
yeah,
to see how Zachary transforms over the years, because I have a feeling
yeah.
he'll be following his mama's, um, still following.
Maybe, maybe not. We'll see what he does, but whatever it will be his, and we will be proud of him for it. So,
Yes,
yes.
absolutely. So, we're going to wrap up, but I do want to ask specifically about NEC Society, and how you support grieving families, because, of course,
Yeah,
you and Erin, who is your
yeah,
co-director, she also lost a child to NEC, and a lot of the families that you come to work
yeah.
with have lost their children. So, talk to us a little bit about the ways that you have created space for those families and ways to remember and honor their kids.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, the neck is such a devastating disease, and we lose way too many babies to this disease. So, what we have been able to do is put together resources for families. And so, we have some of them on our website. under our like resources for families, for bereaved families. And then we also have been able, earlier this year, we started mailing resources to families that were either recently diagnosed or recently lost their child to the disease. And it has information that we wish someone would have told us after either our child was diagnosed or after we had lost our child to NEC, along with a few resources and just things that we feel like we would have found really helpful during that devastating time.
And that's actually one of my last questions for you
Yeah.
is if you could say something to a grieving family right now,
Mhm.
what would it be?
That you are always your child's parent, and time and space and any circumstance will never change that. That connection is forever, and it will change in how you parent your child and how you carry them with you, but that they are always part of you, and that you are connected forever and always.
Well, I can't think of a better way to end our conversation than with that. Thank you so, so much, Jen. You are
Mhm.
forever Micah's mama for sure.
Thank you.
I
Thank
appreciate you
you.
spending time with us and sharing your experience and sharing Micah with the world.
Oh, thank you, Kira. I always love to talk about Zoe too. So thank you for having me, and thank you for what you're doing with the NICU Parent Network. We're proud to be part of it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.